$500,000, 0 cents. That's how much one woman's ego ended up costing her after she treated my Navy patrol boat like it was some rusted-out appliance dumped behind a strip mall. And if you're thinking that number sounds exaggerated, I get it. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't lived it. That's how this war started. Red letters 3 feet tall across the side of a patrol vessel that carried the memory of my dead shipmates. The word trash? And the woman holding the spray can? My HOA president, Delilah Camden, who decided my boat was an eyesore and I was just some nobody she could push around. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. I served 12 years in the Navy. I've dealt with pirates, engine fires, and Somali smugglers, but nothing prepared me for an entitled woman in yoga pants with a rule book and too much free time. So yeah, this wasn't just about a spray-painted boat. This was about boundaries, legacy, and one very bad decision made by a woman who thought rules only applied to other people. And believe me, if you think it ends here, you don't know Delilah Camden. Because what she does next? It makes the paint look polite. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, especially if you've ever had to deal with an HOA dictator like this. And if you love real deal stories full of twists, revenge, and just the right dose of HOA chaos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story? Let's just say Delilah isn't done. But neither am I. My name's Royce Benton, and I live in Serenity Shores, Florida, a place where the palm trees are fake, but the drama is very real. 3 years ago, I bought a decommissioned Navy patrol boat from a surplus auction. It's beat up, sure, but it's the same model I served on during my last deployment, and it's the only place I feel close to my fallen brothers, Marcus and Jamal. I don't fish off it. I don't host parties on it. I sit, I breathe, and I remember. That's all. Until Delilah decided she was the judge of what belongs in her neighborhood and turned my dock into a crime scene. Broken lights, dented hull, protective coating scraped off like she was trying to peel my memories off the metal. She didn't even try to hide it, left behind her fancy leather gloves, monogrammed no less, like she thought the HOA handbook gave her immunity. The next morning, I'm staring at my ruined boat with a busted coffee mug at my feet and rage pounding in my chest. This wasn't vandalism. This was a violation, a line crossed. And if she thought I'd roll over, she was about to learn the hard way. Retired Navy doesn't mean retired backbone. I emailed her that night with photos, damage estimates, and a calm tone that took everything I had. Her reply? I have no idea what you're referring to. Maybe you should invest in better security. Translation: good luck proving it. But some people leave more than paint behind. Miguel Torres, my neighbor and former cop, called me that afternoon. You might want to see this, he said. Turns out Miguel's garage camera picked up Delilah's midnight art project in full HD. Black clothes, designer gloves, can of spray paint, crowbar. It looked like a how-to video on suburban sabotage. We watched the footage 3 times in silence. Then Miguel handed me a flash drive and said, "Looks like Her Majesty's got a record now." I smiled for the first time that day, because now it wasn't just my word against hers. I had visual proof, physical evidence, and a file ready to turn a neighborhood tyrant into a cautionary tale. I didn't go to war over a boat. I went to war because someone decided they were above consequences, because a person with power decided my memories didn't matter, and because somewhere between the gloves, the paint, and the smug emails, Delilah Camden forgot one thing: the difference between authority and audacity. She came after something sacred. Now, I was coming after everything she thought she controlled. The letter had more drama than a courtroom finale, and enough legal jargon to make a judge need a nap. It arrived, folded neatly, in an embossed envelope, complete with a gold HOA seal that looked like it belonged on a wedding invitation, not a threat. "Dear Mr. Benton," it began, like we were. "It has come to the attention of the Serenity Shores Homeowners Association that your property is currently hosting an unsightly, deteriorating naval vessel in clear violation of Section 4B7 of the Community Aesthetic Standards. My boat, my floating memorial to 2 fallen brothers, had just been labeled a detrimental object. That's how Delilah operated. I sat there reading it 3 times while my coffee went cold, each pass more insulting than the last. According to the HOA, I had 30 days to relocate or remove my unauthorized marine storage unit or face escalating fines, property liens, and potential legal action. I half expected the letter to end with, "May God have mercy on your soul." You've got to admire the drama. It was as if Delilah had weaponized punctuation and turned the community rule book into a holy text, and trust me, she quoted it like scripture, right down to chapter and verse. If Moses came down from the mountain with those bylaws instead of commandments, the Israelites would have just gone back to Egypt. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who escalates first. I wore a clean polo shirt and a diplomatic smile and marched over to her stucco castle that afternoon, hoping reason might still be on the menu. Delilah opened the door, flanked by her 2 designer dogs, hair sprayed into a helmet, face pulled tighter than a drum. I calmly explained that my boat was legally docked, registered, and of personal significance. I even offered to put up decorative screening, maybe some faux lattice, or whatever Pinterest says keeps neighborhood harmony alive. She listened like I was reading her a bedtime story she'd already heard and hated. "Mr. Benton?" she said with a voice that had the warmth of a parking ticket. "This is a respectable neighborhood. That floating scrap pile is ruining our property values." She said scrap pile the way someone might say dumpster fire. I thanked her for her time, but inside, something clicked. This wasn't about a boat. It was about control. A week later, I got hit with my first fine, $250, 0 cents for non-compliance. 2 days after that, another for $500, 0 cents, citing continued disregard for neighborhood guidelines. I was being fined for remembering my friends, for keeping their memory afloat, literally. The HOA wasn't a homeowners association anymore. It was an armed bureaucracy in pastel cardigans. Delilah had traded her pearls for power plays and was now using the HOA like a scalpel to carve out anything she didn't like. And if she couldn't shame me into submission with letters and fines, she'd escalate to whatever next chapter in her rulebook fantasy fit the mood. I realized then this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding cleared up with conversation. This was war in HOA wrapping paper. Every fine she sent was like a bad plot twist in a soap opera I never agreed to star in. Violation of landscape harmony, failure to comply with structural aesthetic. I half expected the next one to say excessive sentimentality on private property. My mailbox became a battlefield, and each envelope was a new volley. I stopped opening them over coffee and started opening them over bourbon. It wasn't just dealing with one woman's opinion. I was fighting the system she bent to her will, one weaponized regulation at a time. And the worst part? It was working. Neighbors started glancing away when I walked by. The air got colder. HOA gossip was spreading like crabgrass in July. But I hadn't served 12 years in the Navy to get bullied by a woman who thought rules were an accessory. I knew I needed more than just outrage. I needed strategy. Because Delilah had something most dictators rely on: momentum. She believed her rules were gospel, her power unchecked, and that no one had the guts or the receipts to stop her. But I wasn't most people. I had a digital paper trail, a growing folder of documentation, and the same quiet patience it takes to ride out a storm at sea. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, and the next time she struck, I'd be ready with more than polite emails. Stick around. Because next up, we find out just how far she's willing to go, and just how much I'm willing to expose. Delilah forgot one thing. Neighbors watch everything, especially retired cops with 24/7 security systems and a personal grudge against petty power. 2 days after my boat got defaced, Miguel Torres rang my doorbell with the urgency of someone who'd just cracked a cold case. "Royce," he said, "you're going to want to see this." Now, Miguel doesn't get excited unless there's football or fraud involved, and this wasn't football. He led me into his garage, flipped on his triple-screen monitor setup like he was about to launch a drone strike, and there she was, Delilah Camden in all her 2013 Aiming glory. Dressed head to toe in black, hood up, gloves on, and moving around my dock like a burglar rehearsing for Broadway. If I hadn't been furious, I might have laughed. She was creeping like she thought the Coast Guard had patrols in Serenity Shores. We watched in silence as she spray-painted trash across the hull, smashed the navigation lights I'd just restored, and took a crowbar to the side like she was demoing drywall. At one point, she actually stopped to wipe her forehead, then dropped her gloves right by the stern like breadcrumbs. I looked at Miguel. She really did it. He nodded. Clear as daylight. That video was the HOA equivalent of a smoking gun with lipstick on the handle. It was proof that the queen of the rulebook had broken every one of her own commandments, and now she couldn't backpedal fast enough to unpaint what she'd done. If justice had a rewind button, this was it. But I wasn't pressing play for fun. I was building a case. That same day, I took high-res stills from Miguel's footage, time-stamped and watermarked, and paired them with the gloves I'd bagged like evidence from an episode of CSI Suburbia. Just for kicks, I looked them up online. Turns out those gloves were limited edition Italian leather, $650, 0 cents a pair, custom, monogrammed by a boutique that practically shouted, "Delilah shops here." They were listed in exactly one color, champagne gold, same as the ones sitting in my evidence bag. I wasn't just holding proof, I was holding her proof. Between Miguel's footage, the gloves, and the crowbar fingerprints she so kindly left behind, I had enough to make a judge raise an eyebrow and a lawyer adjust their retainer. But here's the wild part. Delilah still acted like nothing happened. HOA notices kept arriving, each one saltier than the last. She was doubling down, hoping I'd blink first, hoping her status could outshine my facts. I wasn't just battling a person anymore, I was battling an illusion. This facade she'd built, where rules bent around her like sunflowers to the richest light. But illusions crack under pressure. And now that I had proof, I wasn't waiting on karma, I was scheduling her appointment with it. I started compiling everything into a digital folder labeled Operation Queenpin. Not out of spite, but strategy, because this wasn't going to end with a neighborly chat. This was court-level mess, and I planned to show up with receipts. I knew the next move had to be big, and I wasn't the only one tired of her reign. Miguel offered to testify. So did Walter, the neighborhood's unofficial historian and full-time HOA survivor. Word was spreading quietly. Delilah, the same woman who fined a man for mismatched shutters, had been caught spray painting a veteran's boat under cover of darkness. Like mold in a newly renovated bathroom, her image was starting to peel. But you don't take down a neighborhood tyrant with rumors. You do it with undeniable proof and a well-timed plan, and trust me, I was just getting started. Because when someone paints over your past, you don't just clean it up. You make sure everyone sees who held the brush. Stick with me. Next up, the HOA tries to rewrite my property lines and fails spectacularly. So yeah, the HOA queen thought she could tag my memories and walk away clean. But what she didn't count on was a retired neighbor with better surveillance than the Pentagon and me, just stubborn enough to turn a petty act into a full-blown reckoning. I had the proof, I had the patience, and now I had the community starting to whisper back. If you found this story meaningful, or if you know someone battling their own HOA horror story, share this video with them. Seriously, send it to a friend who's been through the same kind of mess, because sometimes all it takes is one boat, one camera, and one really bad decision to remind folks that bullies don't always win. Leave a comment and let me know what you think of this story, especially if you've ever had to outsmart a Karen with a clipboard. You ever seen a property survey commit a felony? Because I have. One morning, sandwiched between a utility bill and a flyer for lawn care I didn't ask for, was a thick envelope with that familiar HOA seal. I opened it thinking it'd be another fine or some poetic new violation like emotional impact of outdated naval hardware. But no, this time Delilah went nuclear. The letter stated that after recent re-evaluation, my dock, yes, the exact one connected to my deed and 3 years of peaceful coffee drinking, wasn't actually mine. According to the enclosed survey, it was community property, meaning my boat was now trespassing. It was like waking up and being told your living room was now a public park. The survey itself looked real enough, stamped, signed, dated. Only problem? I still had my original documents from when I bought the place, and guess what? The new version had magically moved my property line 15 feet inland. It was like someone just took a Sharpie and decided the water didn't count anymore. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so vicious. This wasn't just Delilah being annoying. This was a coordinated legal ambush. She was trying to erase my ownership like a typo. And the goal was obvious. Get my boat declared illegal and remove it by force. That's when I realized I needed backup. Not moral support, real, professional, read the fine print support. Enter Lisa Monroe, urban planner, city employee, and someone Delilah had humiliated publicly at a zoning board meeting 6 months earlier over a picket fence dispute. I called her, explained the situation, and within hours I was sitting across from her in her office, watching her eyes scan both the original and Delilah's revised survey. She didn't even blink. "This is fake," she said, like she was reading the weather. "Not amateur fake. Professional fake. Whoever did this has access to the right forms, but not the right brain." She showed me the alterations. Subtle spacing inconsistencies, a missing watermark and a forged inspector's seal so lazy it looked photocopied from a cereal box. "Someone wanted this to pass a casual glance," she added, "but it won't hold up in court." That's when Lisa joined the fight. We spent the next 2 days compiling everything: original deed, GPS coordinates, satellite images, even historical zoning records. Lisa even brought donuts, because, as she put it, you can't fight HOA fraud on an empty stomach. The more we dug, the uglier it got. Turns out the survey company listed on the fake document, Precision Property Solutions, didn't even exist in any state registry. It was a shell, just a name with a P.O. box tied back to a mail forwarding service. And that's when Lisa said the sentence that made me sit up straight. "Delilah's fingerprints are all over this. Figuratively, but probably literally too." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the woman was out here forging land borders like she was playing Monopoly, with real consequences. I knew then this wasn't just about me anymore. If Delilah was willing to fake a land survey, what else had she forged? How many other homeowners got pushed around with fake fines and shady citations? This was no longer about a boat. This was about boundaries. Legal, moral, and personal. Lisa filed a formal complaint with the zoning board and helped me draft a cease and desist letter that made it crystal clear. We knew the survey was a fraud, and we were prepared to take legal action. Delilah didn't respond directly, of course. Instead, 2 days later, I got another HOA violation. This one was for non-compliance with shoreline harmony. I didn't even know Harmony had a shoreline. But Delilah was getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. So I kept building my case. And Lisa? She wasn't just in, she was leading the charge. With her expertise and Miguel's footage, we were collecting enough evidence to turn this from a neighborhood dispute into a full-blown HOA corruption scandal. Because when someone tries to steal your dock with a fake survey, it's not just theft. It's a warning shot. But instead of running, I was reloading. Stick around, because next we take this fight to the whole community, and they start speaking up in ways Delilah never saw coming. I uploaded the video, the forged survey, the designer gloves, everything, and clicked post. Just me, a retired Navy guy with a boat, a folder full of proof, and a lifelong allergy to bullies. The Serenity Shores Community Forum had been quiet for years, mostly birthday shout-outs and lost cat alerts. But the second that video went live, with the title, "What Your HOA President Did at 2:13 IMM," it was like lighting a match in a fireworks store. I expected a couple likes, maybe a comment or two. What I got instead? An online uprising. Within the hour, comments flooded in, not just from curious neighbors, but from angry ones. People I hadn't heard from in months were suddenly sharing stories like they'd been waiting for permission. Margaret from Birchwood Lane posted about how Delilah fined her for unseasonal floral arrangements. Robert shared pictures of his fence, painted HOA-approved beige, only to be told it clashed with Delilah's community vision. It wasn't just me. It never was. It was like we'd all been tiptoeing around the same queen bee, hoping not to get stung. But now that someone had swatted her publicly, everyone else was ready to pick up the rolled-up newspaper. Then came the anonymous comment. Username, HOA budget reports for the last 5 years. It said, page 3, column 4. Ask where the landscaping budget really went. At first I thought it was just internet static, some dramatic neighbor looking for attention. But then others chimed in. I've been asking about those numbers for years, one guy replied. Another added, we paid for new sprinkler systems in the park. Why are we still using hoses from the Reagan administration? The tone shifted from annoyed to outraged. Delilah hadn't just been enforcing rules. She'd apparently been rearranging funds like a bored raccoon in a dumpster. So I did what any reasonable person with a spreadsheet and a grudge would do. I pulled the HOA's publicly available financial reports, and let me tell you, page 3, column 4 was a hot mess. Repeated monthly payments, labeled emergency maintenance services, all going to the same contractor. One that, when I Googled it, didn't have a website, a phone number, or even an address. Just a P.O. box tied to a zip code 2 counties away. It didn't take a genius to realize something smelled fishier than the marina in July. Especially when that contractor had been paid nearly $30,000, 0 cents over the last 2 years. For what? No one knew. I called Lisa, my urban planner turned investigative partner, and within an hour she was back in my living room with a highlighter and that face she makes when she smells corruption. Royce, she said, tapping the report, this isn't just sloppy, this is laundering dressed up as lawn care. The irony wasn't lost on me. Delilah, who once fined a neighbor for having a non-regulation bird bath, was now looking more like a suburban mob boss than a community leader. And the best part? She had no idea the dam was cracking. Yet. But it was coming, because when you expose one termite, you don't just patch the wall, you tear out the whole foundation. And buddy, we were just getting warmed up. If silence is golden, then exposure is platinum, plated with a floodlight and surround sound. That post didn't just stir the pot, it blew the lid clean off. People were finally seeing Delilah not as a protector of property values, but as the self-serving storm she really was. And now that the forum was awake, we had momentum. But like any storm, it was only a matter of time before Delilah felt the first raindrop and realized her HOA umbrella had holes. Stick around, because next she fights back the only way she knows how, with threats, lies, and the nastiest HOA trick in the book. But what she doesn't know? We've got more receipts than a Black Friday returns line. Delilah couldn't beat me with bylaws and citations, so she did what any desperate tyrant in pearls might do. She came for my livelihood. One morning I woke up to find my inbox flooded. Not fan mail, not neighborhood support, no. This was panic. Clients, colleagues, marine contractors I hadn't heard from in years, all asking the same thing. Is it true you're being investigated for license fraud? Someone had circulated forged documents claiming my business permits were suspended, that I'd been flagged for unsafe work practices, and was under investigation in 3 different counties. It was like waking up to your resume set on fire, and everyone on LinkedIn watching it burn. The timing was strategic. Just 2 days before, I had signed a preliminary contract with a high-end yacht company for a $50,000 0 cents restoration gig. Big job, big profile. It would have kept my business afloat through next year and then some. By lunchtime, that contract was gone. We can't risk associating with someone under review, the rep told me, his voice polite but final, and just like that, 15 years of clean work, reputation, and trust, smeared with one set of phony papers. It didn't take a genius to figure out who lit the match. Delilah wasn't satisfied trying to remove my boat. Now she wanted to sink my entire career. I called Lisa, who by this point had become my unofficial legal compass. I forwarded her every forged document, every cancellation email, every screenshot of online whispers. She didn't say much, just took a sip of her coffee and started typing like a woman possessed. 2 days later, she called with an update that managed to be both infuriating and satisfying. The documents were created using template files that belonged to the law firm Camden and Platt. That's Delilah's brother-in-law's shop, a boutique firm known for helping rich people stay rich and occasionally greasing permits through planning boards like they're buttering toast. The forged reports? Digital fingerprints traced back to his assistant's workstation. Game, set, match. Here's the thing about folks like Delilah. They're not afraid of confrontation. They're afraid of exposure. She wanted me buried in doubt, second-guessing every phone call, every deal, every invoice. And for a minute, it worked. I sat there staring at my business ledger, watching red ink spread like a nosebleed. But once Lisa dropped that bombshell, I realized something important. She hadn't just attacked my reputation. She'd handed me another piece of her puzzle. Because when a fraud leaves a trail, all you need is the right map. And Lisa? She was already drawing arrows, straight from the forged scandal to the HOA. It hit me then. This wasn't about one boat or one veteran. This was about power unchecked, and a woman so drunk on control she couldn't see the crash coming. She didn't just want me gone. She wanted me erased. The way she saw it, if she could make my income vanish, I'd be too busy surviving to keep exposing her schemes. But she forgot the part where I already knew how to tread water. She lit my business on fire while smiling for HOA portraits, thinking no one would see the smoke. And now the flames were lighting up her whole empire, and we weren't done fanning them yet. Stick with me, because in the next part, Delilah tries to spin everything back in her favor until her own family starts spilling secrets she never thought would leave the tennis court. Turns out, betrayal isn't just a HOA problem, it runs in the family. Delilah got arrested mid-serve at the country club. Forehand, handcuffs, then tears. It was poetic, really. There she was in a crisp white skirt, ready to lecture her doubles partner about racket angles when Detective Ramirez stepped onto the court like a referee no one invited. You'd think they were serving her an award, not a felony warrant. Her shriek echoed off the clay like a bad opera note. For someone who ran our neighborhood like a military base with better landscaping, she folded faster than a clearance rack lawn chair. The video from Miguel, the fraudulent survey, the forged license suspensions, those were enough, but the real knockout punch came in the form of family. Travis Camden, her 20-year-old nephew, showed up at my house the night before the court hearing, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Hair disheveled, eyes red, and hands shaking like he was detoxing from secrets. He sat on my porch swing and told me everything. Delilah had dragged him into her schemes over a year ago, starting with minor errands, then full-blown surveillance, and finally vandalism. She was the lookout the night my boat got spray-painted. She threatened to cut off his college fund and foreclose on his parents' mortgage if he didn't play along. He admitted to slashing tires, planting fake complaints, and helping her cook up HOA violation reports like they were microwave dinners. But it didn't stop there. Travis confessed she'd floated the idea of planting drugs in my truck to get me arrested, and even asked him to help sabotage the electrical system on my boat, so when it mysteriously caught fire, she could call it an environmental threat. That part hit hard. I'd suspected she was vindictive. I hadn't realized she was dangerous. Her control wasn't just about lawns and fences. It was about fear. And Travis? He'd been living in it. His full affidavit, sworn and notarized, landed on the judge's desk the morning of the hearing like a legal thunderclap. In court, Delilah's empire collapsed in slow motion. Lisa laid out financial records like dominoes. Fake landscaping contracts, missing community funds, checks made out to shell companies linked to her inner circle. Miguel's footage played like a movie trailer, Vandal by moonlight. Walter, the accountant neighbor, added his own receipts, walking the court through 5 years of creative accounting that made Delilah's books look like fiction with footnotes. And then came Travis, clean shirt, shaking voice, and the kind of honest guilt that even the bailiff couldn't look away from. He didn't just name names. He drew maps, dates, methods, bank transfers. By the end of it, the only thing Delilah could do was bury her face in her hands like the sound of truth physically burned. The judge didn't waste time. Her ruling was swift and brutal. All charges upheld, civil and criminal. Delilah was ordered to pay $500,000, 0 cents, in damages. $8,500, 0 cents for my boat. $150,000, 0 cents for community property damage. $91,000, 0 cents in legal fees, and over $200,000, 0 cents in stolen aid. She was sentenced to 8 years in state prison and 5 years supervised probation. And just like that, the woman who once handed out citations for decorative wind chimes was now headed to a correctional facility. No designer clipboard allowed. Her kingdom built on fines crumbled like dry sheetrock in a rainstorm, and not a single soul in Serenity Shores shed a tear. We threw a block party on the deck of my junk pile. Funny what happens when the HOA queen gets hauled off in cuffs. Suddenly, the boat that was supposedly ruining property values became the centerpiece of community celebration. Folks brought ribs, coolers full of soda, and enough side dishes to cater a wedding. Miguel grilled like he was on a cooking show, and Walter handed out photocopies of the final court ruling like party favors. Someone even tied balloons to the stern with a sign that read, "Community Victory Vessel." I stood on that deck with a plastic plate and a full heart, realizing that justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it does, it tastes like brisket and redemption. Delilah ended up getting 10 years, 2 more than expected after the judge reviewed new charges tied to mail fraud and intimidation. Turns out she'd been cooking her HOA books for so long it was less a budget and more a crime novel with receipts. Her husband filed for divorce before she even reached county jail. He took the 2 poodles and moved out of their gated palace, leaving nothing behind but garden statues and foreclosure papers. I'd feel bad if she hadn't tried to destroy everything I loved. But as Walter said while slicing pie, sometimes karma just needs a better accountant. The whole neighborhood exhaled together like we'd all been holding our breath for 3 years and finally remembered how lungs work. The boat, by the way, got a full makeover. The restitution check covered all repairs and then some: new lights, new paint, upgraded systems, and I kept the original red graffiti under a layer of clear sealant, a permanent reminder that even vandalism can be part of the story. The same kids who used to cross the street when they passed my place now climb aboard with their parents, pointing at the deck like it's a museum. I tell them about Marcus and Jamal, the brothers I lost, and how this boat was never just a boat. It was memory, honor, and now something more. A floating symbol that no bully gets the last word, not even one in tennis whites and HOA stationery. As for Travis, he didn't just walk away from his aunt's mess. He walked into something better. Lisa offered him an internship at her office after the trial, said anyone brave enough to expose a family member deserved a shot at building something real. Last I heard, he was taking night classes and working on a legal portfolio focused on HOA ethics. Yeah, that's a thing now. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is. From lookout to legal, the same kid who once carried her crowbar now carries court briefs. People can change, especially when they're finally free to breathe. And me? I went back to work. Clients returned, projects reopened. The smear campaign fizzled out faster than Delilah's last HOA vote. But what mattered most was this: Serenity Shores became a community again. Real elections, transparent finances, fewer violations, more conversations. The fences got fixed, not fined. People stopped hiding and started waving again. And it all started with a boat and one bad decision made at 2:13 in the morning. Funny how something meant to destroy me ended up rebuilding everyone around me. If you've made it this far, here's what I'll ask. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder. Someone fighting their own HOA dragon or dealing with petty power in a nice suit. Let them know they're not alone. Leave a comment and tell me your story, because who knows, your next-door nightmare might just be the next tale we take down together. That night, after the last burger was eaten and the music faded into laughter, I stayed back on the deck, alone for a moment. The same deck where I once stood holding a shattered coffee mug, heartbroken by red spray paint and silence. I ran my fingers across the polished rail, looked out over the water, and realized something deep in my bones. This boat didn't just carry memories. It carried transformation, from grief to grit, from silence to strength, from victim to voice. Delilah thought she could break me by attacking something sacred. What she actually did was remind a whole neighborhood what happens when one person stands up and says, "Enough." And maybe that's the heart of it. This story? It's not really about HOA violations or fines or even a boat. It's about legacy. It's about refusing to be erased. It's about fighting back, not with fists or rage, but with evidence, patience, and principle. That's something worth remembering. That's something worth sharing. If you found value in this story, if it made you think, smile, or even just clench your jaw a little, send it to a friend who might be facing something similar. Remind them that the quiet ones, we don't stay quiet forever. And if you've ever battled an unjust system, dealt with a petty power trip, or just needed proof that good people can win, leave a comment. I want to hear your story. And if this kind of justice, heart, and humor speaks to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and don't miss the next story, because next time, we're taking down a neighborhood bully who thought no one would ever dig up her dirty deeds. Let's just say she didn't know who she was messing with. And before I sign off, let me ask you this. What would you like me to take on next? What kind of wild HOA chaos, power-hungry Karens, or underdog victories do you want to hear about? Drop it in the comments. Your ideas could shape the next story on this channel, whether it's something that happened to you, your neighbor, or that one cousin who sued his HOA and won. We want it, and trust me, if it's got justice, irony, and just enough spite to make a good sandwich, we'll make it unforgettable. So, hit that like button if this story hit home. Subscribe so you never miss a single twist. And don't just watch, participate. 'Cause around here, every great story starts with someone brave enough to speak up. We've got more truth to tell, more bullies to unmask, and more lessons to share, one outrageous tale at a time.